Hi. So I wanted to try something a little bit different today. Because there is a smear campaign and there's been a lot of really big lies, but it's been mixed in with a little bit of truth. So there's been a lot of stuff that's been really hard to decipher, but there's not a lot of asking for clarity. So I'm going to provide some clarity in what I'm calling part one of the Clearing Up Misconceptions series. So we're going to try The Man by Aloe Blacc. It's fairly easy. There's only 6 chords. It's pretty repetitive, but I did do a couple dry run throughs, which was easy without the music. It gets a lot faster, but I think with some practice, I'll be able to tighten up the timing a little bit so that I can move a little bit faster. But a lot of it is just jumping around between A and other chords. So I think that once I get the rhythm down and the order of the chords a little bit more memorized, I think it'll be easier and I'll be able to move a lot faster. But I really love this song. I love that Aloe Blacc was on The Masked Singer. And I think he's got a beautiful voice. And I love all the work he's done with Avicii, in addition to what he's done as a solo artist, too. And I just think that this is a really beautiful song. And I'm going to play this one today in grand piano just because it sounds like it matches the song a little bit better. So we'll see how it goes. Come along for the ride. To me, this song is about being confident and unbothered, and the personal testimony of resilience, even in the face of adversity. It's cliche and it always sucks to hear in the moment, but hardship really does build character if you let it. I say that because if I hadn't faced all the hardships, I wouldn't be who I am. The perfect set of unfortunate circumstances. Anomalies, if you will. Sometimes I feel like I'm a specialist in experiencing grief. On the flip side to that, it's something that I feel like I handle well. Everything has a duality to it. So there's always something, at very least a lesson. This is quick. Okay, I'm going to do a dry run through of the course. Even within negative experiences that can exponentially contribute to your growth. This is a really good way to transmute that energy into something positive. I even find myself reflecting on how funny it is that there can be so many different connotations to two simple yet common words. There are many variables and lenses that they can be perceived through. The way the and man are used together have also evolved over the years. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying that I haven't seen any of the new season of South Park yet, but I've seen some of the clips and trailers, so I've got a bit of an idea. Would explain some things. I think the most ironic and iconic thing about the show and their creators is in their own twisted way of being indiscriminately discriminate, they are actually one of the best existing examples of inclusivity. I know that might sound outrageous, but you probably only think of it like that because of the style and the delivery of the messages. At the end of the day, it's just supposed to be comedy and a satirical take on situations. And I feel like it's more common now to laugh at other people's expense. And that's why I feel like maybe we've lost some of being able to laugh at ourselves sometimes. They've always said nothing or no one is off limits, which they've stood on over the years. They even parted ways with Chef, a fan favorite, based on maintaining that principle. There are a few things I respect more than something like that. That's called fairness and equality, regardless of how you look at it. And to me, one of the greatest mysteries will be what was said in the Super Friends monologue, which they fought to get those episodes to air as well, to maintain the show's integrity. Oh, I missed it. I'm finding it easier to read off here and not worry so much about where it is with the words here because I feel like I know the song well enough to know where the beats go. So I'm going to try it again. Honestly, the world needs a sense of humor at the time that we're in, and there are a few better ways to get some good laughs in than South Park, so just laugh it out. And again, haven't seen it yet, so this is just based on what I have, but I can be empathetic to their perception based on experiences in their lives and where they're from, and the narratives around the role of music in that. It wasn't something I had previously considered as I was making these episodes, but mostly because I'm not from an environment where those experiences are common. Not out of any disrespect. Okay, I'm gonna rewind it a bit. Me and my mold different from the rest, and he broke that mold, so I know I'm blessed. It was a good opportunity for reflection, though. I'll also reiterate that I was unaware of my reach. I have YouTube and Instagram, and neither reflect this. So, until about a month ago, I was under the impression the only people who were actually watching the videos were people I knew who had never heard my side of the story. As the behavior devolved, it was becoming more clear that they were being misled. I just tried to go about my own life and try not to let the opinions of others bother me. This is more difficult than I thought it would be. But the more diluted it all became, though, and the more I was being put in jeopardy, music just seemed to be the best bridge to be able to reach those who weren't open to listening to me, but would maybe gain a little more actual understanding and perspective of who I am and what I've been through as they watched, because they very clearly were watching. This is another reason why seeing multiple perspectives and having open dialogue is important. Just because one thing is true doesn't mean the other is always false. Like I've been saying, most of it is just a matter of the lens that you're looking through. I'm behind. In an attempt to clear up another misconception as well, I don't mean any disrespect to Charlie Kirk by mentioning what happened in my last video either. The intent was not to make that about me or any less about him. And I think Erica is a perfect successor for Turning Point because no one would have understood his vision better, and there's literally no better way for her to carry on his legacy. I'm a firm believer in the best way to keep their memory alive is to stay close to the things that they loved and the things that you loved doing together. And I apologize if the previous episode came across ill-intentioned in any way. I think this is another example of lens of perspective. Not to diminish anything, grief is fresh and I get it. There's a lot of confusion, and my mission is different and rooted in my country, currently in what I would consider an advanced state of challenge, and we don't have the same share of star power. Quality of life has been degrading for the last 5 to 10 years. A large contributor to that is the division and lack of accountability or outright unwillingness to have conversations with opposing perspectives. It's an important topic of discussion at a time where we need more stability and opening the lines of communication for constructive conversation in order to build a positive outcome just seems like a great start to improve the situation. Also, let's re-normalize things not being a competition. Why does everything have to be either or? In many spaces, there are room for more than one. For example, spreading the word of God. Right now, we need as many people doing that as possible. What's the harm in having representatives of both traditional and non-traditional if it were to increase the appeal of faith? So all those tangents aside, the reason I actually picked this song today was because there seems to be a lot of, we'll say, insinuations of transhood, which as far as I know and as far as I can remember is not the case. I do, however, have a couple ideas where that could have come from, but who knows? Not me, because there are a lot of people who seem to know more about my life than I do. But apparently nothing I actually know is as it seems at this point anyway. And I can't say there's a lot that surprises me anymore. And I'm not sure if I've ever known the truth about anything or everything because most of it has turned out to be lies. So maybe it's true. Maybe it's like a hermaphrodite situation. I heard that's actually more common than we were taught. And it's just funny that there's a spectrum of genders and it's barely talked about within that space. When my guess is, and this is purely tinfoil handkerchief theorizing, why didn't we consider that to be a potential deal with those Olympic boxers and some of the other female athletes with higher levels of testosterone? It's my understanding it's less about appendages in that case and more about genetic makeup. Understandable biological deviation? Okay, no. I'm going to practice the pre-chorus. Because now I'm doing good with the verses, but it's the pre chorus and the hook that I'm having a hard time with.
Also, in my case, I do have a uterus, though I have never been pregnant, as far as I know. It's my understanding I wouldn't have certain bodily functions if that was the case, or would have been able to develop ovarian cysts. Other factors to consider include there's also a guy I know that if you run us through filters for opposite genders, we look pretty identical. Weird. This, however, is a good example of where multiple things can't be true for the story to make sense. And that's where critical thinking and using discernment should come into play. Can't both be a trans man and a teen mom. And when I was younger, the most overprescribed things that we had were antidepressants, Ritalin, and birth control. Hormones wasn't really a thing, as far as I know, outside of what you would get in birth control. So I'm pretty confident that was a natural chest I had at 12. But again, sometimes life is stranger than fiction. Even if the trans thing were true, though, what would it matter to anyone else? Why would it matter at all if we've been told it's something that we should be accepting of and not be ashamed of? Other people talking about it would hinder potential romantic opportunities for me. But being upfront, if that's what your identity is pretty critical too. Nothing is phobic about having preferences, but a good way to develop a phobia would be to try to unsuspectingly force it on someone. But that's just my personal opinion. That's the thing about a smear campaign, though. Some of it's just so ridiculous you don't even know how people could buy into it.
Go ahead and tell everybody I'm the man, I'm the man, I'm the man.
Especially people who have known you for a long time. But there are many things that are easy to interpret a certain way if they are presented a certain way. In my case, it was positioned to ruin my relationships, my career, my home life, mostly over edits of saged conversations.
Then he broke that mold, so I know I'm blessed.
But otherwise, just impersonation and contacting people either about me or on my behalf. And now the DoorDashians are even offering tuning service. So, you know what? I just can't have nice things. It's fine. I would like to have nice things, but I'm used to it at this point. Why would any nice thing for me not have to go to someone else? When they want it, they just do whatever. I'm not saying I've never done some messed up stuff, but I also know no one beats me up in shame over anything more than myself. But if you learn and grow from those shameful experiences, then what's there to be ashamed of? It only takes as much energy as you give it.
Well, you can tell everybody.
For example, with the smear campaign, the worst they have at this point is at least 3 years old. Of the things that I would have opened myself up to, at least. I haven't been that person in a long time, and this situation is why I chose to change to begin with. In that respect, I'm grateful for it. Having confidence in knowing that, even if it was a previous version of you, and consistently putting in the effort to do better and make better decisions will help get you over that mountain of shame. Because one day it will start looking more like pride and a sense of achievement with how far you've come. You wouldn't have imagined climbing that mountain however long ago, right? In those previous versions of yourself. What's helped me most on my path to healing has been to not focus on the things that I can't change and try to change the things that I can. Things that have been done are done, and I can't change that. So I can't stay living in that space of coulda, woulda, shoulda, where I used to be so complacent.
In my cards and I didn't fold. Well, it's not that hard when you had soul.
But I can't progress there. So I no longer like to wallow in those spaces. And fun fact, a side effect of this is a top tier cutoff game. If you're not looking towards improving the situation, then don't let the door hit you or the good Lord split you. That's how I operate these days. So one of my tinfoil handkerchief theories is that pretty much everyone is being blackmailed, and hot take, if cancel culture, mob mentality, and unwillingness to have conversations with people who do things differently than you do weren't so common, unless you do depraved shit, no one would or should care. Especially now that it seems like everyone is a swinger. What's so embarrassing about it? It sounds cool in theory, but upon further consideration, also sounds like being starved for intimacy. On my wedding day, I just want someone who looks at me the way Sirkin looks at Ada. And because he's frustratingly sexy, no, they're not still together in real life. Don't click the links. It's important to remember we are still people and not just walking personal brands. You can be both. I've learned the value in less screen time, separating personal interests from business ones, not maintaining connections that drain my energy, being grateful and focusing on the more important things. And I've found it to be helpful, but it's more helpful in a meritocracy where you can build more authentic connections because your skills speak for themselves. I used to seek out any and everyone's opinion on everything. I'm much less inclined to do so these days. Some of that is the PTSD from constantly being lied to for a prolonged period of time. A lot of it is because I find it easier to recognize intention these days. Most of it is because it doesn't always matter. Because it's your life. They are your decisions to make and your consequences to take. Unless you know me, then they're probably mine instead. At the end of the day, what makes you happy? Not happy in the moment, but what would make you happy long term? Something that would give you something to look forward to hope for, to believe in. How would those different things impact others around you? And how would others' feelings about yours influence your way of thinking? If there is a difference, where is the disparity? What would be required to overcome that disparity? Is that kind of effort what you're willing to put in? Or would you be willing to live with the regret of not putting in the effort at all? When my silver streak started coming in, I started reflecting on a lot of wasted years and wondering about what things would have been like if I had gone a different way at some of the forks in my path. Not necessarily for better or worse, just for different. I know it's easy for a lot of people to say, just don't put yourself in a position like that, but it's really not that simple. It's not usually quick or as easily perceptible for what is true in the age of digital deception. At this point, I'm inclined to believe that nothing is as it seems more than I am to believe everything I see and hear about other people. If it's not in front of me, I didn't see or experiencing it, I'm probably not going to believe it. And even if it is in front of me, I'm going to side eye it and ask it a ton of questions. I wouldn't call it paranoid. I would say it's more along the lines of being hypervigilant. I can't do much about where I've come from in life, but I've tried to be the best I can for the future. And keep working towards that. Try to be a little bit better of a person every day. Acknowledging it's always a work in progress and often comprised of a bunch of seemingly insignificant decisions. That's why I'm not as bothered about what people say about me as much as I used to be. Even if in some respects what's being said is worse, I know who I am and what I've experienced, so a bunch of people who weren't there telling me I didn't doesn't matter to me.
Been through the worst, but I still give my best. God made my mold different from the rest, and He broke that mold, so I know I'm blessed.
There came a point where I decided to stop living my life for other people, and although I became isolated in a sense, it's more true to me and the person that I want to be. There are a lot of things I wanted to try for years that those around me had no interest in, like my crafts. I stopped writing for like 10 years, which is fine, but it's not a good relationship if only one person ever gets their way, no matter what kind of relationship it is. I tried to be agreeable. I made way more concessions than I get credit for on most fronts. Sometimes it's just better to cut your losses, though. I know for me, one day I woke up and realized that other people had more pieces of me than I did. Seems ironic now in those terms, but it's true. I felt like I was just being drained of energy that I wanted back to use for other things for myself. And it's usually still surprising when people who I thought would be happy for my progress and growth seem to want to throw every obstacle and roadblock in my way. People are so weird. In the first verse of the song, he sings, "I played my cards and I didn't fold. Well, it's not that hard when you got soul." And I think that rings so true. Well, mostly true. Sometimes it's good to keep a few close. But there's strength in your soul that can help you create the best hand with what you've been dealt. It just requires looking a little deeper at each card and what it represents. Sometimes a pair can be a good hand, but if you want to pick a pairing, then you should be able to choose which game you play without interference. Pausing there for a second because also in the same verse, there's the line, God made my mold different from the rest, then he broke that mold so I know I'm blessed. You can say our cards are our experiences, environments, and circumstances. Our souls are uniquely us.
Do it again. Stand up now and face the sun. Won't hide my tail or turn around.
How we react to the energies in those environments can depend on many things. Kind of going back to what I was saying in the Hide in Your Shell episode about being vibrational energy, the higher the vibration you're at, the better hand you'll be able to make even out of lackluster cards in a rigged game. What I would say from my experience is that finding your soul's purpose helps. It sounds kind of woo-woo, I know, but it's true. We are all here for individual purposes, but because we don't talk about it a lot, not everyone is fortunate enough to figure out what theirs is because it takes work and it's easy to get complacent. There is always something that makes us truly us. At least one thing. Maybe it's more than one thing. A skill set or certain characteristics. But I feel like just using those terms makes it sound more material than it really is. I recently read The 5 People You Meet in Heaven by Mitch Albom, and I would highly recommend it. It's a great representation of this concept, essentially. It's basically about a guy who thought his life was wasted and was insignificant, later learned little acts of kindness, either by him or toward him, were the difference makers in defining moments of his life. And even though he thought he was a nobody, there was a purpose or a meaning to everything. The book starts because he was trying to save a little girl's life, but through his lens, he was just doing his job. Another good example of this would be in Everything I Am by Ye. I know I've mentioned this before, but the line, everything I'm not makes me everything I am, really exemplifies this. When I talk about authenticity and standing confidently, the real discussion is about character traits, not necessarily outward identity. It really is what's on the inside that matters. And I could list out all the reasons why that's important, but I think that's a chapter of a bigger book. We are perfectly imperfect in our own ways, and the ways I'm different from other people is what I feel makes me special. But there's good and bad things that come with that because, like I talk about all the time, there's a duality to everything. But self-acceptance helps you figure out who you are and who you really want to be moving forward. Yeah, I may not fit in, but I'm reframing it as I'm one of a kind. It can be frustrating.
93%, that's pretty good. I'll be the quick relief to all your stresses.
But at the same time, I do like being different too.
Missed it again.
And I don't know what's wrong with an optimistic view of the world.
Somewhere I heard that life was a test. I've been through the worst, but I still give my best.
Or perceive that it's not achievable to reach a place where we could have that. When that's where you're at, all you'd want is a healthy, positive outlet and to be able to enjoy simple things, like being able to take your dog to a park to play ball safely, extending beyond past this weekend. And because I'm authentically me, I'm going to add the fun fact that authenticity is also associated with your solar plexus chakra, just below the ribs. A blocked solar plexus can look like shame, overactive can look like arrogance or pride. So it's important to find a balance of both.
It's a thin line between love and hate. Is you really real or is you really fake?
Speaking of balance, maybe instead of being a man, I've just gotten better at balancing my masculine and feminine sides. Have we considered this? Isn't that kind of the concept of a two-spirit, too? We all carry traits of both, and I have a whole lot of tinfoil handkerchief theories and hot takes on that for a different day. It's about qualities and energy, not gender though. But I think we get caught up in labels way too much. I know it might be a foreign concept, but there are things that you can do and just not talk about. And thinking also works this way. Sometimes believing in a concept doesn't mean you have to identify as that concept. So again, I'll say believe what you want to believe. We can debate all day whether or not I'm a man. And I'd argue that I only operate with the level of audacity warranted for the situation. But regardless, there's much less to debate about when it comes to whether or not I've got balls.
Go ahead and tell everybody. Yay. Okay. I'm happy with how that turned out. I did get a good couple clean run throughs out of it. It's still the pre chorus that trips me up a little bit, but I did get the hang of it kind of near the end. So I'm really happy with how it turned out. It's really fun to play, especially the intro. I don't know why, maybe because that's what I played the most, but I really love how the intro turned out. And overall, this was a fun song to play and an easy song to learn. So thanks for hanging out with me. And until next time, keep the peace and keep rocking on.